Hi, I'm Selena from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester, and I'm here with Bill Zoldak, or J. William Zoldak. And Bill has actually written several books, actually a series of books called Grandpa's Something or Other. And Bill, could you kind of explain what your books are all about?
Well, let me start by just saying that when I started writing my books, I was thinking about my grandchildren, and I was thinking about sort of my legacy. And so I just started writing down, maybe 10 or 12 years ago, stories from my childhood that I thought my grandchildren someday might like to read. And so my books are pretty much come from that area. So I like to tell the stories of the 1940s and the 1950s in a small town. And sometimes some of the stories are from rural settings and some of them are from in-town settings. And that has to do with the fact that I lived in both places. So so I try and write those stories. And most of the stories are children's stories. And they're the kind of story that perhaps a grandparent could read to their grandchild and maybe discuss their own thoughts afterwards about their own childhood in perhaps that era or even a different era. I think it's really important that grandparents share with their grandchildren the stories, because I think not only will they treasure them, but I think it's a part of history too. So that's the kind of stories I write.
And you're a local author, aren't you?
I am. I actually, I live in Oxford, Massachusetts, but I was a high school counselor in Auburn for 35 years. And so, yeah, I've got local roots, although the stories actually come from my home along the Hudson River in New York. And so, you know, but most of the stories are similar to what could happen here or almost anywhere, you know, in any small community.
Okay, so what can readers expect from your newest book?
Well, the newest book, I actually took a little different approach. My first two books were from sort of a rural setting and some fun stories that I thought were fun anyway, or interesting. But this one, I got to thinking that Main Street in my hometown was a special place. And I did have some experience with Main Street because my grandparents had a tailor shop on Main Street. So what I thought I would do is write the stories about my experiences with the various shops and in the various parts of Main Street. And again, I think these translate to all Main Streets in small towns. Back in the 1940s and the 1950s, you know, small towns, Main Streets in small towns were very active. And people all shopped and did all of their activities there. And as a child growing up in that environment, you know, I just roamed in and out, and people knew me because they knew my grandparents. And so it was also, I would say, it was pretty safe environment. You know, the whole town kind of looked out for you. And if you do read my book, you will see that I have an interaction with my grandmother all through it, and her spies throughout the town who kept track of me and allowed me to have that kind of freedom, which I thought was great for a kid. It was great growing up in that setting anyway.
Mm-hmm. And what is can you show us your book?
Sure, I got a copy right here. Yeah. And you'll notice the cover, which I'm kind of pleased with the cover. I worked with the publisher on this, and this is actually one of the photographs that's in the book. There are 37 photographs in the book, and they are of pretty much that time period in that community. So to try and give people not only a chance to read something about it, but can actually have a visual too of what it might have looked like at that time.
Mhm. And what do you think would draw readers to these kinds of books?
Well, my hope was that, and still is, that people will find an interest in this. I mean, this is also, in a way, it's kind of a history book, because it's a history of what took place in small towns at that time. And so I forgot the question now, but but anyway, I just think those, I think that draws people to it. I think there's a certain number of people who will say, I experienced that too, and I'd like to see that shared.
Mhm.
So I wrote my experiences, but I'm hoping, like I do with all my books, that grandparents will share those kinds of things with it, and this just gives them sort of a roadmap to do it.
Mhm. That's great. So, what was the inspiration for this particular book for Grandpa on Main Street?
Well, I think the inspiration was to I was thinking about my grandparents' tailor shop, and the Main Streets don't have tailor shops today. And then I got to thinking, there's a lot of stores that are not in small towns today. Most towns don't have a cobbler. They don't have a feed store. They may have like a grocery store of some kind, but there's a lot of stores that they don't have. And of course, Main Street encompasses more than just stores. It encompasses, for example, the fire station. And in my particular town, it encompasses churches, various churches. And at one end of my town is a pond where people get together and they have fishing activities, or in the wintertime, ice skating and things like that, all part of the community life. And so I thought that was worth getting out there to people.
Hmm. And what were the steps that you took to bring it from your initial inspiration to a finished product?
Well, like with all books, you have to have a plan. And in my case, I had to develop the plan as I went along. With my first two books, I had to get an illustrator, and so that was a challenge to do that. And but with this one, I wanted to go with photographs, and the photographs, I was able to get that through the local historical society there. They had a lot of old photographs. And then I also hooked up with a photographer. And this is kind of an interesting little aside. There was a photographer in my town, and his name was Snapper Earl. Well, that wasn't his real name. They called him Snapper because he was taking snapshots all the time. But he was like the third generation of photographers in his family. And so he had, I found out from people at the Historical Society, a lot of old photographs. Well, when I went digging to try and locate him, and I finally did, what I discovered was that he lived across the street from me at one time. And so there was an instant connection. And so we've kind of become, I wouldn't say close friends, but we've become friends through this whole process. And I just, so again, I don't know where I am in the question, but I just, I thought that was an interesting aside, that the development, how these things happen. It's wonderful when when you're writing, you get into places you never thought you'd be. And,
well, speaking of that, what kinds of research actually went into writing the book?
Well, the research, most of what came out or is part of the book is from my memory at the time. Now, research, yes, in that I had to find the old photographs, which, as I just explained, I got some of them through the Historical Society, some of them through the Snapper Earl, and some of them were also just photographs that were in the family photographs that we had. And so from those three sources, I was able to put together these photographs and then write the story around them, or actually I did the other way around. I wrote the story first, and then I plugged the photographs in afterwards to in the proper places. So.
Okay. And how did you actually create the book? What was the steps that you had to go through to create the actual book?
Well, fortunately for this book, it was my third book, and the learning curve wasn't nearly as hard this time. The first step for me was, I'll start by saying that pretty much I've got a lot of stories written. That part I've got down. Now, that doesn't mean they're in finished form. They still need editing and that type of thing. But I have a lot of the ideas down. And that's not also to mean that I'm stagnant either. I'm writing all the time, different stuff. But then the next thing was to try and find a publisher. And in my case, I found that step very hard, to try and find someone who would do it. And so I finally talked with a friend who was I knew was an author, and I asked him how he went about doing that. And he gave me the name of his publisher, and I called his publisher, and sure enough, she called me back, and I sent the text to her, and she said she thought she could do something with it, and it went from there. And so once I had the publisher, now all I really do is I have a process. I just send the material to her. She works on it, develops a cover, which she's very creative. I love her. I love the work she does. And then she puts it in some kind of form. Not that mine isn't in a form, but she gives me suggestions as to how to do things and how to move things and where to put things. And we sort of work together on it. It's all done by, on the computer. So but to answer your question, once I had the publisher, things were all downhill after that because she helped me through it.
Okay.
And I'm 77 years old, so it's not like this is an easy thing to learn all this, but I'm glad I did.
Great. So, what can we expect from you in the near future?
Well, the bug has kind of caught me, so. I'm really working on two avenues right now, and I'm not sure. Well, I do know which one's coming first, because I've already hired an illustrator to work on it. But my next book is going to be about the circus in a small town. Back in those days, in the 40s, and this one actually takes place in the 1950s. In those days, in the 1950s, the circus would come to town. And it was always a great day. People would be excited about going to the circus that evening. And so, this is a story about my interaction with the circus in an attempt to get tickets for that evening's program. And it came out kind of fun. And I think it's set in those times that are no longer available to children today. You can't go and work at the circus anymore. And but in those days you could, and that's what this story is about. The other one that I'm working on, and I'm not sure if that's going to come out or not. I'm working on. I've been writing a lot of poetry lately. Well, I call it poetry. Some people just might call it rhymes, but either way, they're in a rural setting, and I thought maybe I'd put a few of them together and see what I could do with that. And again, for me, this whole project is just a hobby. It's something I enjoy doing, and So because I like it, hopefully it'll come out and other people will too. That's my thought.
Great. Could you just give us an idea of what your book sounds like? In other words, read us a little bit of your book.
Well, yeah, actually, I can do that.
Just to give us an idea.
Let me set it up by saying that, yeah. Let me start it this way. The one section of the book, well, the book is set up so that we 40 places on Main Street are described. And my interaction with those 40 places is described in the book. One of those places was a place called Knapp's Feed Store. Now, Knapp's Feed Store, feed stores are no longer, you don't see those, especially on Main Street in towns. But back in my hometown, there was a feed store right on Main Street. And as a child, I used to once in a while go in and I would talk with Mr. Knapp, who owned the store. And I always found him sort of a gruff, grumpy old man, who I was a little bit, I won't say afraid of him, but I didn't stay close to him. Yeah. So anyway, one day I decided I was going to go and buy myself a plant. And I don't know why, I was 4 or 5 years old and I decided I needed a friend. So I thought a plant might fill the bill. So the only place I knew in town that had plants was Mr. Knapp's Feed Store. So I went in and sure enough, right on the table near the front of the store was a table that had all these various kinds of plants, Christmas cactuses, jade plants, African violets, that kind of thing. So Mr. Knapp met me at the door in his usual way and asked me what I wanted. And I said I was looking for a plant. So he said, go over to the table and pick out your plant and then bring it to the register. So I said, okay. So I went through them all and I found a jade plant that I liked. So I picked it up and I brought it over to him at the counter. And I said to him, how much is this? Because, I only had a dime and a nickel in my pocket. And he says, well, how much do you have in your pocket? And I said, well, I got a dime and a nickel. He says, well, the price is 15 cents. And I thought to myself, that's pretty good. Came out just right. Well, of course, over the years, I realized what Mr. Knapp had done. And this grumpy old man really wasn't so grumpy, but really, sort of a really nice person. And so that was like one of the interactions that I described. There's more to the story to that, but that's sort of the gist of it. And to wrap it up, I actually owned that jade plant for over 50 years. And I brought it wherever I went, and it was like a friend. And that's the way it started out when I was 4 or 5 looking for a friend, and it became a 50-year friend, which is no longer with us. But anyway, that's one of the interaction stories that I tell in the book.
Oh, wow, that's great. Okay, now I have some questions for you about being a writer. What is your favorite part of being a writer on the whole writing and publishing process?
Well, for me, it's just sharing my memories. And I enjoy sharing the memories. And in fact, I think that's the only way I could write. I mean, I've heard people say that you have to write about what you know, and my memories are important to me, and I happen to have a good memory. So for me, I do that. But there are other parts of being a writer that I find really helpful and very interesting. Sometimes I go, for example, to books signings and things like that. And, rubbing elbows with other authors is a wonderful thing. You hear stories that you just can't imagine. It's like every time I come home from one of those things, I'm excited, not because I sold a lot of books necessarily, but just because of the stories I've learned and I've talked about, and I tell my wife all about them, all about these people that I met, and people do wonderful things, and they each have their own story, and um, it's just a fun thing to do. As you can tell, for me, this is all about fun. I don't really find it hard work because I just write down what comes into my head, and then and I try and share it that way. So, but then my stories are light too. So it's not, not like I get into deep stuff. So I can do that, I guess.
That's great. And what do you consider the most challenging part of the writing process? And how do you overcome that?
I guess I would say, for me at least, the initial step was very hard, and finding an illustrator was very hard. Which brings me to another kind of interesting story, and how I got my illustrator. I live in a summer place where I have a summer cottage, and there are lots of people who have summer cottages there. And I was struggling with finding an illustrator. I didn't really know quite how to go about doing it. One day I was walking down one of the roads, and in front of the house was this lady, and she was painting outside. And she was doing this painting. I don't even remember what the painting was. So I said to her, I said, you don't by any chance, be interested in illustrating books or anything? And she says, oh, I've illustrated a couple of books, she says. And so I said, oh. So I said, well, so let's talk some more. And we talked a little bit, and I shared the story that I wanted to have illustrated and with her. And she says, oh, I think I can do that. And so she's now kind of my illustrator. I unfortunately, or it doesn't really matter much, she moved to Kansas, but we still communicate, and and she's been illustrating. Now, the last book, of course, this particular book, I didn't need an illustrator, but the one about the circus, the next one, she's going to be illustrating that for me.
Great. And so now, what has been your favorite adventure during your writing career?
Adventure. Well, I guess the story that I just told you about the illustrator, that was kind of an adventure. Finding that particular person. Another thing that I find interesting is meeting with people. During this whole process, and sometimes I go to, I go out and I talk to a lot of people. I try to do things on do book sales through the internet in whatever way I can. But the thing that's most fun is just to go out and talk to people and meet people. And sometimes I get writings, people who want me to do signatures at a bookstore or something like that. And it's fun just talking to folks. And I'm kind of a talker anyway. I like to talk. So, but anyway, yeah, I guess I would say that for my adventure.
Okay. So what is the greatest lesson that you've learned thus far in your writing career?
Well, there's lots of lessons. Well, what I learned is that there's many parts to this publishing business. Getting an illustrator or getting photographs and that type of thing is part of it. Doing the editing, is part of it. And learning how to do that, learning the whole process it took some time and some effort, and I'm better at it now, but I learn with each time. I mean, each book you want to get copyrighted, so you got to go through a process there to working with the Library of Congress, for example. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned as you go through this, and it's an interesting process, one that a whole world that I never knew before. And I never thought I'd get into it either, to be honest. But now that I'm in it, I kind of like it. So,
So what piece of advice would you want to share with other authors?
well, my thing with other authors, I don't know, but what I'm thinking is I would like to share with grandparents. You notice I'm going to the grandparent theme a lot.
Mhm.
The reason I am is that I don't think grandparents write their stories down enough. And to me, turn grandparents into writers. I would say get out there and not only share your story verbally, but write some of the stories down. And the reason I say that is that over the years I've heard people say, you know what, I want to go and see my grandmother and I want to record her stories, and then they never do. So I say to the grandparents, take it the other way around. Provide the stories to them, to your grandchildren, and believe me, they're going to want that, and you're going to feel good doing it. So that would be my thought on other writers. I'd concentrate on those grandmothers and grandfathers out there. They've lived some stuff, so they've lived history.
Sometimes even parents.
And parents even, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Now I have some questions about you as a person. What is one thing that most people don't realize about you?
well, I don't know. There's probably a lot of things people don't realize about me. Well, let me start with sort of the obvious first. I was a high school guidance counselor for 35 years. And so that puts me in an academic setting, which is good. And I enjoyed every moment of it. But what people don't perhaps know about me is that I'm an outdoors person. And after I retired from the educational field, I went out and I started building stone walls for people. And, everybody thought I was a little crazy. Who retires and then moves rocks? But, I really enjoyed it. And it was something I had done when I was young. I never really built walls much, but I was in a farming setting. So I knew how to do some of those things. And so I just did that. So I had fun with that. The other thing about me, you said one thing, but I'm going on. The other thing is that I'm a history person, and I enjoy history, and more often local history. I love to hear in any kind of community about the stories of that community. I'm not talking the stuff that's in textbooks, but I want to know the legends. I want to know the little stories that happen in these communities, and that history to me, kind of turns me on. I am, in fact, the president of a historical society in a small community up on the North Shore, and I love that because I can dig into the history. Right now, for example, in the chapel that we have up there, we have an old, I think, 1913 Seth Thomas clock that no one has not worked in 20 years. And now we're working on, trying to restore it and get it operational again. That kind of stuff turns me on, to be able to do that kind of thing.
Well, you can kind of tell from your book that
yeah, I suppose.
Interested in that. Yeah. So what is or are your passions when you're not writing, obviously history, and how do you make time for some of the hobbies and things that you love?
Well, actually, I kind of think it the other way around. I do a lot of the things, and I use writing as my hobby. So, I kind of, I like to do a lot of I'm a fisherman. I like to go fishing. I love to walk. I love to build things. I'm pretty good at building stuff out of wood and stuff like that. And I enjoy all those kinds of things. But when I sit down to write, it's almost like, that's my hobby, to do that. And so, and I love sharing, things. If I make something, for example, I love sharing that with people. I mean, I make blackberry jam every year, and I give it away to all my friends, and just stuff like that. I enjoy doing that.
Okay.
Besides writing.
So what does your writing space look like? And what do you need to have around you when you're either writing or editing?
Yeah, well, my writing space is quite small, and it's just a corner of a room, really. And basically what I have is I have my computer, and I've got to say, if it were not for the computer age, I probably wouldn't be writing. I'm not like a person could sit down to a typewriter or writes things out. I wouldn't do that well. But we're in an age now where it's really quite easy to set up your computer and go into Word and write some stuff out and write your thoughts out, and then you can go back and fix it, and you don't have to erase it or write it over. It's it's a great world we live in for that kind of thing. And so yeah, so my computer's around me. Usually I have scraps of paper because I do want to write down thoughts once in a while, that I don't not going to put in this place, but I'm going to put it over here in another time. So I'll have that kind of thing. But yeah, basically that's all, just, a piece of paper, a pen, and my computer. And for me, because I write memories, most of it comes out of here, I don't have to research it a lot. You do have to go back and, check on things once in a while and say, okay, was that the right date? I got it close, then you go back and fix it. So.
And is there any food or drink that you like to have with you when you're writing?
No, I don't particularly need a food or drink, but I got to tell you, I love desserts. So if there's some cookies around or something like that, I'm sure going to eat those while I'm working on it. I have to watch out that I don't drop the crumbs on my computer, but.
Okay. Do you prefer when you're writing, do you prefer music or silence?
No, I'm a quiet person. I almost have to have quiet to concentrate on things. I know people who love to have activity and music around them, but I'm not one of those.
Right. Okay. And how important has the New England setting been to your writing? And I'm sure that answer is very important.
How important is what?
Has the New England setting been?
Oh, the New England setting. Well, I don't know. I love New England. I was not born in New England officially. I was born in New York, upstate New York, which is practically like New England. So it's that kind of surrounding has always been around me. And I've always been a person who likes to be in a rural setting if possible. And of course, in New England, you can get a lot of that. New England's a special place. And so being able to write in this area is really a great thing. So yeah, I think it's important to live here. I wouldn't want to live in like the South where it's where it's so warm and it's a nice place to visit, but so I like the setting here and I think it helps my writing,
Mm-hmm. Okay, and writers very often have furry or feathered or otherwise non-human companions to help them with their writing. And do you have any of those, and do they help or hinder you?
Well, it's funny you mentioned it. My black cat just walked through a few minutes ago. So I'm not sure he helps much. They help much with the writing, but they're always around. And I got kind of a cute story with that. We have two cats, and actually we almost always have two or three cats, but we were down to one cat at one point because our other one had passed away. And so the one cat that we had was a Persian, and we got him, and he came with a fancy name and all that. But the name he was used to was Reddy. and he's red in color. So, you know, it matched him to be ready. And so that was good. So we went to a shelter to pick up another cat. And we fell in love with this big black cat, semi-long hair, and he kind of big, 17 pounds. And he was like, I think he was like 7 or 8 years old. He was not a young cat, but we fell in love with him. So we brought him home, and his official name, I mean, his name from where he was, apparently they told us that the folks that had owned him before had passed away, and that he, had been neglected. But he was used to older people, which was kind of perfect for us. So anyway, his name was Fluffy. And I said, who the heck names a big black cat Fluffy? I mean, I think of Fluffy as white, that. And so I says, I can't keep the name Fluffy. So anyway, we thought about it a little bit, and we decided, well, we have Reddy, and we decided on Ruffy, because Ruffy sounds a lot like Fluffy. And so now we have Ruff and Reddy. And it's not spelled that way. We spelled Ruff as R-U-F-F and Reddy as R-E-D-D-Y, but they're Ruff and Reddy. And they do hang out while I write, and they keep me company.
That's great. I have 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
One is, where can people find your work aside from Annie's Bookstop of Worcester? And I'm going to put in a plug, like I do for every video, that people can call us at 508-796-5613, and then they can order your books that way, or send us email at orders@anniesbooksworcester.com. Where else can people find your books?
Well, let me start before I say that how wonderful I think Annie's Bookstore is, and
Thank
the
you.
programs like this that you do. But what a very friendly place, and a nice place to experience. So I would encourage anybody watching this to go visit and talk. But as for my books, they're on all all of the networks on the computer, like Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Walmart and all of those. So they can all be bought in that way. Locally, I've got them at a few of the stores around besides Annie's. In Oxford, they're at the Enchanted Loft. They have some. And also at Gypsy Roses, which is right next door to the Enchanted Loft. And another place in Auburn that a lot of people know is Farmer's Daughter. They have my books there. In Webster, the Book Lovers Gourmet carries my books also. And those are the local places, pretty much. And then because my books are about places along the Hudson River, I have places down there too, but your local readers wouldn't know about those. But yeah, that's what they are. Online, I think, is a good place to buy. But I'd go to Annie's first.
And my last question is, how can we follow your work and share your awesomeness?
Oh, well, I don't know how awesome, but when I first started doing this, people tell me I had to get a connection with the internet. And so I chose Facebook, and I may expand it at some time, but I am on Facebook, which is under, my name, but also I have an author's page on Facebook called Stone Hedges. Not hinge, but stone hedges, like rows of hedges. And that's actually my brand name. And so if people go on Facebook and they type in Stone Hedges, it'll come up, and they can follow my work there. And I put up things as I think of it to update. what's going on and so on.
Okay. That's great. Any more?
No, I do appreciate you and Annie's for doing this. So yeah, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us today. And I'm sure we will be seeing you at Annie's again.
I'm sure you will.
Hopefully you'll come and do a book signing for us.
I would love to.
Okay, when this pandemic is over, completely
Right.
over. Right. Okay, and thanks very much, Phil. And we will be seeing you.
Okay, thanks, Lena.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.